Hi guys, I'm here with AJ. AJ, your mom speaks volumes as to this place. It's a reason that Rancho Cucamonga is open. But I want you to take me back, AJ, to that moment when mom introduced brain balance to you. What were your first thoughts when you got introduced?
So I remember like forever ago, like I was in high school at the time, getting assessed, and she's like, "Oh," she didn't really explain too much about what it was. Just like, "Oh, there's this program. I want to look into it." A friend of mine, like in our ward at church, recommended it,
Yeah.
and so they were like, "Well, they're just gonna run some tests or whatever, and we'll see how it goes." And I was like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
And I took the test, and the person giving the test was pretty nice. So I was just like, "Yeah, it's fine. It's whatever." And then once my mother had signed up, and we started like driving nearly like an hour and a half, like 3 times a week down to Encino. It was nuts. Like the traffic was crazy, and I remember thinking, this is kind of a drag having to drive out all the way out here.
I can understand that because it's often like the question is, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Like, when are we going to get there?
Yeah, and it was during the summer too, so like it was
really hot.
Yeah, no, well that, and I had a lot of plans, and I'm like, Mom, I want to go hang out with my friends. Like I don't want to have to go to Brain Balance, gosh. And so then once I actually started going, it was interesting enough. I didn't hate it. I thought a lot of the coaches were really cool. My coach at the time was his name was Matt, and he was with me in sensory motor. And then Armin was my cognitive coach. And at that time, we hadn't introduced any of the iReady stuff, so we were on pen and paper. And I'm not gonna lie, I liked the people, but like the first week, I was like, this is dumb.
Why am I doing these repetitive things?
Yeah, I'm like, I could be doing a million other things. And then on top of that, I was doing these home exercises that were like super weird and making me look like a crazy person. I'm like, this is not.
What is this doing? What is the purpose of this? Did you ever ask that?
I did, honestly. I asked my mom, I'm like, what is all this do? And she went over the report and like where I scored, and it's like, oh, you can see here that you scored like above an 18-year-old. And I was like, I think it was like 14 at the time, and I was like, whoa. And then in some areas I was like a 4 or 5-year-old. I was like, that's kind of crazy. And then she was like listing off my difficulties, and I was like, oh, okay.
Because you're aware of where you struggle.
I was aware that I had Asperger Syndrome, and I had difficulty like focusing. I remember it used to frustrate me a lot when I would like just I would get distracted so easily, and I'd get angry with myself, and I almost didn't even start to notice it. But then past the first week when I was doing homework, this is a story that she might have told you, I don't know, but it was the big thing for me, at least, when I started like, oh, maybe this is doing something. About I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks in, I was like, my mom said she was getting in the shower and for me to do my homework. Now normally this would happen, and my mother would go, okay, I'm going to shower, then I'm going to come downstairs and have to help him with his homework because he wouldn't have done any of it. Yeah. And I wouldn't have. I would have just like, farted around and like, been distracted. And I wouldn't have like even started on it probably. I probably would have gotten like my name down and like halfway through the first question. That's it. Yeah. And so I ended up just sitting down and doing it, and I just like finished it really quick. I remember it being like really easy. And then I like knocked on the door, and my mom was still getting dressed. I'm like, I'm done with my homework. And then she's like, no, you're not. It's been like 10 minutes. I'm like, I'm done. I promise. And she's like, I don't believe you. I'm like, okay, I'll slide it under the door then. Jeez. And then she's like,
here, I did it. Here it is. Yeah.
And then I slid the homework under the door, and then there was a long pause. And then she's like, who's doing your homework? I'm like, what are you talking about?
Well,
she's
that's like, terrible. What do you expect of me? What are you calling me?
And then she was like, who's doing your homework? I'm like, nobody's doing my homework. What are you talking about? She's like, this isn't your handwriting. This is not your like somebody else did your homework. And I'm like, no, I totally did this. And so she ended up coming out, and I like showed her, and then she's like, holy cow, you did. And then we ended up comparing homework from like a week earlier, and my handwriting had improved so substantially that my mother didn't recognize my handwriting anymore.
Wow.
which is nuts. And that kind of made me go, what?
Then you started going, wait, something obviously has happened here.
Yeah.
That's a pretty significant change.
Yeah, something has changed, obviously. And at that point, I started getting a lot more invested. Like, I started caring about the diet because I remember, oh my gosh, the diet.
Be real with us, because it's a little bit of a shift from what you were probably used to.
Yeah, no, it was like gluten-free, dairy-free, all this stuff. And gluten-free for me was the hardest because I love bread.
We all do. Even those, my cousin is allergic to gluten. You know how hard it is for me to eat stuff in front of her? She hates it. So I get it.
It's tasty. But, like, honestly, like, I've been through the program. Like, to all you guys at home, I don't care who you are and what brand you use. Gluten-free bread is always terrible. Like, it's...
There's been a couple that have improved. If you didn't know, but because it's becoming more. But when you had it, which was about 5 years ago, it was nasty. Believe me, gluten-free people, they know that.
Yeah, like 5 years. I remember my mom came home with a gluten-free rice bread loaf. And I remember when she set it down on the counter, it wasn't like the crinkling of a bed. There was a thunk. And I'm like, did you?
That's not normal, Mom.
That's not what bread is supposed to sound like. Because it wasn't like crinkle, it was thunk.
Yeah. That sounds like a rock, Mom. Where's the gluten in it? Give me back my gluten. But that was a switch, right? That was a bit of a switch.
Yeah, but like once I knew that it was making a difference, I was like, okay,
You were all in.
Yeah, I was like fully committed. I'm like, okay. I believe it. I believe you guys. I know that this is legit. And I went through the program and I was like super into it. And that's the thing is like I've seen a lot of kids have gone through the program and some of my friends even at school have gone through the program. And like the ones who see the most progress are the ones who fully commit like I did. Like I was like every day my mom was like riding me to do my home exercises. She was really strict with the diet. And I was going to every single session, and I wasn't skipping no matter what. But, like, some of the kids who aren't seeing that progress and who aren't, like, are maybe stalling a little, it's because they're not fully... Because, like, if you commit and, like, to everything, it works.
100%.
100%, like, straight up.
Yeah.
Because...
Not taking the least amount of it. Yeah.
It's not easy. It's not. Just straight up. It isn't.
Yeah.
But it's...
But how much time was that for you? Overall?
Overall, I think the biggest changes happened within the first 3 months, and then the more minor, like, quality of life changes happened in 6 months, and then stabilization, kind of when everything really settled, was in, like, 9 months. So total, I think I went through about 9 months of the program.
Well, that's better than 12 years of school sometimes. Like I'm just saying, if you have to compare the two.
Because I like even after 3 months, I went from like C's and D's in most of my classes to A's and B's, and again my handwriting significantly improved. And like I remember like my mom crying one day because like, and she tells me this story as well. It was just something so minor too. Like I was. Because I was easily distracted and I had ADHD and I just couldn't, I was constantly operating in a fog. When my mother would call my name, it wouldn't be AJ, it would be AJ. You know what I mean?
Right.
What?
Yeah.
No, but then one day I was walking up the stairs and she went AJ and I immediately turned around and went, yeah? And then she kind of stopped and she started to choke up a bit. I'm like, Mom, what's wrong? And she's like, you've never done that before. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, you've never...
Responded on the first one.
You've never responded on the first one. And I'm like, I haven't? And so, I mean, it's made a huge impact.
Well, and that's interesting, I think, for a lot of people to understand, especially the teens and those that are in it. It's hard to know on your own. You're like, this is my regular normal. Now, your regular normal before brain balance and after brain balance, what did you see of yourself, other than your writing, that you said, wow, I'm so glad I had this?
Well, mainly it was the attentiveness, but another really, really big thing was empathy, because I wasn't very empathetic. I was very logical, literal, linear, and I was honestly a little selfish, but that was partially due to me not being fully aware of, like, just my own emotions and other people's in general because of my disability. But afterwards, I found myself like empathizing a lot more, and people started coming to me, like especially a lot of my close friends with a lot of their like emotional burdens, and I was like helping them through it and everything, when before that just wouldn't have happened.
Right.
I would have been like, I'm sorry, I don't know. Like when it's like, oh, how do I cope with this? I just would have been like, I don't know, man.
Why are you asking me?
Exactly. I'm like, why don't you see a therapist or something? Like,
By the way, that's internal dialogue for the majority of us, but you're right. It's that emotional part that had kind of what I call you flip the switch with this, right?
yeah, and another really big thing is I was able to kind of get the big picture and think around a situation before I acted, because before I was very impulsive. I would just act,
Yeah.
like damned be the consequences. And I would.
I think it's a good idea, therefore it must be.
No, exactly. And
Yeah.
I wouldn't, and I would, hurt people's feelings and stuff like that if it was something I said, and I would and there would be like severe consequences for my actions. But like afterwards, I was able to kind of, when I was in these situations, I would like stop and go, okay, is my current plan of action the correct one? And if not, where do we go from here? When before, again, that just wouldn't have happened, period. Because I just would have acted on my impulses.
Right.
And would have just done whatever I first thought of, Like, you're talking to a kid before the program, like, this was a really funny story and just shows how impulsive I was. I had stepped in dog poop and was walking back to the house. I'm like, man, how do I get this, like, dog poop off my shoe?
Right.
And the side of the house that we had, like, the wall was very rough and had lots of ridges.
Uh-huh.
And my first thought was, oh, that's the perfect material to wipe off.
Why not? It's just waiting for me to rub it off.
I like took off my shoe and started screaming, and my mom came out and was like, what on earth are you doing? And then I went, oh yeah, that probably wasn't a good idea.
Oh, but it's true. I love what you said a moment ago. You weren't fully invested until you saw the changes. Sometimes people are unaware of their changes, or they don't want to admit that it's something that's been introduced.
Yeah.
That you lived up this way all the way till 15, right? So it was, again, something you were pretty
used to.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember one of my friends, his name is Colin, and he went through the program with me. Well, not with me, but he went through the program, and it was so funny because he would always say, I don't really feel different and stuff like that, but I could tell just interacting with him because, again, before he was very cold and cynical and was like really funny and very intelligent, but again, he didn't really have a lot of awareness for other people's emotions when he said the things that he did. But after the program, I could tell the difference just talking to the guy.
Yeah.
I was like, dude, you've totally changed. You're way more like with it. And like, you're totally, more invested in people's emotions. And he's like, well, I don't feel any different. I'm like, well, you are. So it worked.
Yeah. Well, and that's the important thing, the before and after from your friends and family seeing that and realizing that. Now, I know you have been a mentor to other kids here that have come in because you understand, but we can only talk about it based on what we see and written down, what children go through, like when they don't want to be touched or there's certain things going on. But you have lived that, right?
Yeah, a lot of my students, it's funny, like especially because I work as a cognitive coach, and there's one exercise called Randot deduction, and where you have to like stare at a 3D image and there's like a circle and you have to click on the key where the circle is. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the kids, they're like, I can't see it. And they move closer, like right up against the screen. I'm like, don't do that. It makes it harder. Trust me. And they're like, how do you know? I'm like, because I've done it. I know that it makes it harder. Like, trust me. And the kids go, really? And I've actually told my story to some of the kids. And that's kind of... And they've kind of, we're able to grow a bit closer because they're like, oh, so you do get it. And I'm like, yeah, I do, because I've been exactly where you are. And the different things. And especially when kids try to, like, wimp out of certain exercises and try to like finagle and
All
cheat
right,
a
do the
little
least
bit.
amount, like yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, bro, I invented that. Like, just
I know what you're doing.
Yeah,
I did it 5 years ago.
yeah, don't even try it. Like, don't play me like that.
Well, AJ, it's been a pleasure being able to talk about this with you. Thank you so very much for spending time with us. For those that, especially the kids that are out there and even the parents, what's your message to them if you got one thing across to somebody that's on the fence going, well, I don't know, should I, shouldn't I?
Stick with it, and it is difficult, but it is 3,000% worth it. But only if you know for a fact that you can make the full equipment. Commitment. Sorry. But if you're kind of like on the fence about it and you're like, oh, well, the diet's going to be hard, then honestly, it might not be for you, because if you're not fully committed, you're just throwing your money away, because it's like you're not going to see a lot of change. But if you make that commitment, if you really put in the hours and the hard work, and you make your kid do the home exercises, and you're like, really good attendance, and you stick with the diet, then you're going to see more change in your child than you will with literally any other program.
Yeah.
As someone who, was in special ed since kindergarten. And,
Really?
Yeah, and my mother, she even said one of the quotes that she likes to say is, I saw more changes in 3 weeks than I did with 12 something years with special education and all these different programs that we've tried.
Wow. Yeah, no, that means a lot. I know of adults that have gone through special ed class and have come out not knowing what is going on. Again, I want this also for adults. Right now, it's for the ages, I believe, 4 to 17 is primary.
Yeah.
But your mom did mention that she would open it up to others that are in need of it. But again, this is why I've been such a voice on this. Like the moment I realized this can make a change in people's lives, AJ, I didn't know you at that time, and I'll tell you, when I met you, I would not have known all of these problems existed 5 years ago. I had no, and honestly, I thought she took you when you were like 5, and you worked it all out when you were 5. So to know that you did at 15 gives a lot of people hope, and I appreciate you for spending time with us, sharing your story with us.
Thank you so much. I'm glad I could share my story, because I love sharing it, because I know what it's like, and it's weird looking back, because I was still me, but my thought process was like so different back then. And honestly, I wouldn't trade any of the stuff that I've gone through in Brain Balance for anything, because it's helped me become a better person and a more complete person.
Thank you, AJ.